Today's passage is all about Jehoram, the son of the evil Ahab, who became king over Israel, the northern kingdom. Hi, I'm Ken Godevanis, and this is Digging for Scriptural Gems. Let's look together at 2 Kings chapter 3, verses 1 to 12. Now we're told that he became king when Jehoshaphat in Judah, the southern kingdom, had been reigning for 18 years. But if one compares the text in 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 51, with this text, we realize that the two need some reconciling. Check it out. Stop the video, check these two things out, and then come back. Let's continue. To do this reconciling, we must suppose that Ahaziah, having reigned during the 17th and the greater part of the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, was succeeded by his brother Joram or Jehoram, which is the king we're talking about here. So there was Ahab, there was another brother, Ahaziah, who reigned for a bit, and then Jehoram. Jehoram became king in the end of that 18th year. Otherwise, if we don't do that, then we'd have to say that Ahaziah, having reigned 2 years, those 2 years were in conjunction with his father. And he died at the end of that period when Jehoram ascended the throne. I'm going to leave that up to you. Now, Jehoram reigned in the north for 12 years, but wasn't as evil as his father and his mother, Jezebel, so the text says. The writer credits him with at least putting away the sacred pillar of Baal, which Ahab had made. Verse 3, however, tells us he still clung to the sins of Jeroboam, which had made Israel sin. Then in verse 4, we hear about Mesha, the king of Moab, who bred sheep. Seems that annually, we assume, he paid 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams to King Ahab while Ahab was alive. But when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the new king. So Jehoram left Samaria and decided to muster all Israel via a tax levy or via human personnel, as in soldiers, getting them ready for battle against Moab. In fact, he even got Jehoshaphat from the southern kingdom to join him. Now, the latter of these two kings, Jehoshaphat, offered him full support and all resources, indicating that they were indeed brothers and one in this cause. Now, this was a great contrast, or in contrast with his father Asa, who was at war with Israel. The two of them debated which route they would take to face Moab, and they decided on going via the wilderness of Edom. Verse 9 tells us that the two kings were also accompanied by the king of Edom. So off they all took, traveling, or rather wandering around for 7 days, and soon found themselves without water, both for their armies and the cattle that followed them. Right away, Jehoram fears the worst, thinking that the Lord got these three kings together just to deliver them into the hand of Moab. It appears his guilty conscience convinced him that this calamity was the judgment of God. His own sin made him think that everything that happened against him was the judgment of God. Do you know anybody like that? The godlier Jehoshaphat said, "Wait, I believe there's a prophet of the Lord nearby, and we may inquire of him." Now, one of Jehoram's servants answered, "Yes, Elijah is here, and he used to pour water on the hands of Elijah." Or put another way, he was Elijah's servant. That confirmed for Jehoshaphat that the word of the Lord was with Elisha. He said so, and then the three kings went to find Elisha. Now we're going to stop there and dig deeper. Jeroboam was the 9th consecutive bad king over the northern kingdom, which never had a really godly king. Commentator Dilday sheds some light on the sins that he committed. He writes, quote, "The sins of Jeroboam that Jehoram perpetuated were not related to the worship of Baal, but to the false worship of Yahweh under the calf or ox images that Jeroboam set up in Dan and Bethel. So his problem was not with Baal worship, but with false worship of the true God. This was primarily a political strategy rather than a religious one. I want you to think about political strategies today with respect to religion. We'll get back to that in a minute. Knapp goes on to say, he appears to have been in spiritual matters one of those undecided, neutral characters who puzzle most observers and who never seem to know themselves just where they stand or belong. Poole believed that Jehoram put away Baal worship out of bad motives, either because he was frightened when he remembered the judgment that came against his father Ahab and his brother Ahaziah, or because he wanted to impress Jehoshaphat so that the Judean king would agree to an alliance. Fact is, we don't know what his rationale was. As for the Moabites, they lived on the eastern side of the Dead Sea and were under tribute to Israel. When King Ahab died, the king of the Moabites saw an opportunity to escape the taxation that the king of Israel had forced upon him for years. David Gusseb says Jehoram of Israel asked Jehoshaphat of Judah for military advice because Jehoshaphat was more experienced in battle than Jehoram. The king of Judah advised Jehoram to attack Moab from the south, going through the very dry desert of the Edomites. And commentator Robert Jameson adds more details here. He says, this was a long and circuitous route by the southern bend of the Dead Sea. Jehoshaphat, however, preferred it partly because the part of the Moabite territory at which they would arrive was the most defenseless, and partly because he would thereby enlist in the expedition the forces of the king of Edom. Might as well pick those up while we're at it. But in penetrating the deep rocky valley of Ahshy, A-H-S-Y, which forms the boundary between Edom and Moab, the Confederate army was reduced, both man and beast, to the greatest extremities for want of water. They were disappointed by finding the wadi of this valley, the brook Zered, as we read about in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 13 to 18. They found it dry. End of quote. We should also point out that verse 9 mentions the king of Edom, but already in 1 Kings 22:47, we're told there was no king in Edom at this time. So the word king here must refer to a vice-regent appointed by the king of Judah, according to Dilday. So, in wrapping up, what can we take from all this? For me, I realize that all that is going on in politics today is nothing new. It has been going on for thousands of years. Rulers and politicians have played religion any way they have wanted to. They use it to suit their purposes. Rulers and politicians have also, for thousands of years, joined forces with their enemies or former enemies to achieve their goals against still other enemies. Nothing has changed. Just watch the news. And finally, subservient nations have always, just like the Moabites, have always sought an opportunity to get out from underneath the demands of their oppressors. As Christians, we need to be aware of what's going on in the world and realize that today, as in the days of Ahab and his boys, God is still in control and ultimately brings about his plan for mankind. Thank goodness for that. Let's just be careful to live our lives in such a way that our guilt does not cause us to think that whenever something bad happens in the world, or right next door, or in our homes, it's because of our sin. Next time, we're going to see what happens when these kings do find Elisha. Join us for that. In the meantime, I want to ask you personally to like this video, not because you really like it, I hope you do, but because I need those likes. We need those likes to keep the video visible to YouTube observers. That's the way the algorithms work by YouTube. Also, if you like what we're doing here, you may want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Digging for Scriptural Gems. But most importantly, if you really want to make me happy, study the Word of God on your very own. Till next time.